Honestly, there are nights when you watch a derby, you see the final score, you read Real Madrid won the derby, and you think the story ends there. But not this time. Not that night. That night, it wasn't just a 3-2 win at the Bernabeu. It wasn't just a tense match, a comeback, a wild script, a burning derby like only Madrid can deliver. No, what we witnessed was a night of rupture, a night where football became the backdrop for something much deeper, much dirtier, much more personal. And when the final whistle blew, the real shock hadn't even started yet. Because while everyone thought the players would head straight to the dressing room, breathe, calm down, Federico Valverde didn't leave. He stayed. He waited. He waited for Baena. And I'm telling you right now, the moment I heard that, I understood we were no longer talking about a simple derby. Madridistas, before we go any further, if you love this kind of storytelling, raw, emotional, full of context and real opinions, drop a like right now and subscribe, because here we live these nights the way you live them. And more importantly, tell me right now in the comments, in your opinion, did Valverde act like a warrior defending his honor, or did he cross an unforgivable line? Because trust me, that debate is going to split the entire Madrid fan base. To understand what exploded that night, you have to go back long before the first whistle, long before the penalty, long before the refereeing controversy, long before that brutal tackle that made the whole stadium erupt. What happened between Valverde and Baena did not begin in those 90 minutes of a derby. It had been building for years. And to me, that is the key point. Anyone who only saw the tackle without knowing the history is completely missing the real nature of the problem. Merengues, you all remember that old story that shook Spain. A story that became almost taboo, never fully addressed in public, but known by everyone behind the scenes. Back then, Baena was accused of saying something about Valverde's family. Not a regular on-field insult. Not one of those little things players forget when they get home. No, the kind of words that stay in your head forever, the kind that cut deep, the kind that turn a sporting rivalry into a personal wound. And in that kind of situation, let me be very clear with you. We can love football, we can talk about professionalism, discipline, the badge, the values, but we all know one thing. When a man feels his family has been touched, he never truly forgets it. Madrid fans also know what happened next. Not officially, of course, not with polished statements or carefully crafted press conferences, but everyone in Spanish football heard about that parking lot, about the waiting, about the confrontation that allegedly got physical. An episode many people wanted buried. And this is where I take my stand, that silence around the story never solved anything. It only postponed the explosion. The wound was never closed. It was just covered up. And when you cover a wound without healing it, it gets infected. Supporters of the Casablanca, every time Valverde and Baena have shared a pitch since then, you could feel the electricity. This wasn't media drama. It wasn't internet exaggeration. It was real. The looks, the duels, the little hidden kicks, the needless shoulder bumps, the moments where each of them seemed to be sending a message to the other. You could feel it even through the screen. To me, it was obvious that sooner or later this would blow up again. The only real question was, when? And that night, in the biggest domestic derby of the season, with the Bernabeu boiling and the pressure at its absolute highest, we got our answer. Because the match context itself was perfect for a detonation. Real Madrid came in full of confidence, riding momentum, carrying that feeling that when the Bernabeu pushes, anything becomes possible. And you know that feeling better than anyone. That's the DNA of this club. When the atmosphere gets heavy, when the stadium roars, when the shirt suddenly feels heavier than usual, things happen. But Atletico didn't come to survive. Simeone's men came in needing a result, and you could feel it from the first minutes. Discipline, compact lines, serious concentration, and a clear plan to wait for the right moment and strike. Honestly, Real's start to the game wasn't spectacular. There was possession, yes. There was control, yes. But there was something missing. Sharpness, verticality, that feeling of immediate danger. Atletico, on the other hand, looked like they had prepared this battle carefully. And then, very early, we entered that zone derbies love most. The zone where every duel starts feeling like a declaration of war. Madridistas, one of the first real shocks came in that action involving Marcos Llorente. And let me be honest with you, even though I'm here to tell this story with passion, I refuse to tell it blindly. Carvajal is a warrior, a real one. A player who often embodies the fire of this club, the rage, the refusal to bend. But there are nights when that rage comes dangerously close to chaos. His challenge on Llorente immediately ignited controversy. Llorente had already taken the shot, the play looked over, and Carvajal came flying in with brutal force. Many saw it as a clear penalty. Many saw it as a foul impossible to ignore. And in a derby already this electric, that kind of moment only pours gasoline on a fire that's already waiting to explode. Merengues, there was also that other sequence that made the other side furious. Vinicius going down in the box in a moment where the referee gave nothing. And I know this might bother some people, but I'd rather speak honestly to you. Vini always plays right on the edge of theatrical excess. That's also part of what makes him unplayable. He provokes. He exaggerates at times. He forces defenders to live on a razor's edge. Does that make people judge him harder? Yes. Does he use that to his advantage? Yes, too. And in a derby, every gesture from Vinicius becomes a weapon for the other side. Every fall, every grimace, every protest, it all instantly turns into controversy. Supporters of the Casablanca, despite all that, the real punch to the chest came around the half-hour mark, and for a few seconds not a single Madrid heart was beating normally. Atletico struck, a clean, sharp, almost surgical move, a sequence that found the gap, and the Bernabeu froze. That silence, you know that silence. That moment when 80,000 people almost stop breathing, when the stadium seems to lose its heat all at once. Seeing Real Madrid behind at home in a derby is always a strange feeling. It's not just conceding a goal, it's a blow to pride. And that, to me, is where you recognize the great nights of Real Madrid. Not always in the beauty of the football, not always in the purity of the tactical plan, but in that ability to turn pressure into rage. In the second half, everything changed. And of course, the central moment, the one that blew up social media, TV studios and every bar in Spain, was that penalty given to Real Madrid. Brahim enters the box, there's contact, the referee checks it, watches it again, hesitates, and then points to the spot. Instantly, the stadium explodes. Instantly, Atletico screams. Instantly, the whole country splits in two. I'll tell you what I honestly think. That kind of play is the perfect symbol of modern football. You have replays from every angle, experts telling you black in the morning and white at night, TV shows turning half a second of contact into a national trial. Did Brahim look for the contact? Many will say yes. Did the defender take a risk in the box? Others will say yes too. But one thing is certain. The moment the referee goes to the screen and makes that decision, the soul of the match changes. Madridistas, when Vinicius stepped up, you knew. So did I. There was that walk, that coldness, that way he approached the ball like he already knew he was about to silence part of the country. And he did it. No hesitation. With that big player arrogance we love when he wears our shirt and hate when we're forced to watch it from the other side. Equalizer. Bernabeu in total eruption. Game alive again. And emotionally, from that moment on, the derby entered another dimension. The Madrid faithful smelled blood. Atletico began to wobble. Maybe not purely in the football itself, but mentally. And that is often where Real Madrid kills you. The second you start arguing with the referee, protesting, looking at the bench, losing 2 seconds of focus, Real keeps going. And Valverde, of course, was the one who arrived. His goal, beyond the footballing aspect, carried huge symbolic weight, because it wasn't just the tireless midfielder scoring, it was a man already carrying inattention, already emotionally overloaded, already driven by something much deeper, striking at the heart of the derby. Honestly, in the moment, many celebrated that goal as pure Madridismo. And I understand that completely. The Bernabeu erupted, arms went up, the screams came down from the stands. That feeling that Real had seized back its destiny once again. But when you re-watch the whole night with distance, that Valverde goal almost feels like a warning. As if the emotional intensity of the game had unlocked something inside him that he was no longer able to control. Merengues, Atletico did not disappear. And that's what made the derby even crazier. They came back. They hit again. They reminded everyone this was never going to be a formality. But in the middle of that battle, You could feel that another match was being played inside the match itself, the one between Valverde and Baena. Every camera shot of them felt heavy. Every duel looked loaded with a subtext that everyone could feel. Then came the moment. Late in the game. Real ahead. Maximum tension. And then Valverde goes in, from behind, on Baena. A challenge of a violence that simply cannot be disguised. A play that, to me, goes beyond a rough derby duel. This is no longer intensity. This is no longer the heat of the moment. This is a message delivered with a boot. A message that looked premeditated long before the contact happened. Supporters of the Casablanca, I'm going to be direct. The red card was inevitable. And even though it hurts me to say that about a player who represents so many values of fight and sacrifice, I refuse to be blind. Valverde crossed the line. Yes, there was history. Yes, there was the wound from the past. Yes, there was the accumulated provocation, the resentment, the unfinished business, the ghosts of that parking lot, the words never digested. But on a football pitch, that kind of challenge condemns you. And yet what came next was almost even more disturbing. Valverde didn't want to leave. He argued. He boiled over. He gestured like a man who wasn't just rejecting a sporting punishment, but a personal humiliation. And in that moment, I had one very clear feeling. This was not over. Not even close. His expression wasn't the expression of a player furious at the referee. It was the expression of a man who had not yet finished what he had in mind. Madridistas, he eventually left the pitch. But he did not leave the war. And what happened after the final whistle, in that tunnel of the Bernabeu, away from the main cameras, away from the noise of the stadium, turned this derby into something much more serious. Because Valverde didn't go straight to the dressing room. He waited for Baena. And what he reportedly said to him in that moment, that's where the story changes completely. Madridistas. If you're still here, it means you felt it too. This derby didn't just leave a scoreline behind. It left a scar. One of those nights when football spills beyond the pitch, when emotion overflows, when passion becomes almost dangerous. So before we dive into this final part, let me tell you from the heart. Subscribe right now if you want Real Madrid stories told the way they deserve to be told. With intensity, with honesty, with that mix of pride and discomfort that defines the greatest nights. And most importantly, I want to read you all the way through. If you were in Ancelotti's place, would you publicly defend Valverde, or would you call him out in front of the whole dressing room? Because now we're touching something deeper, something that can unite a squad or crack it from the inside. When Valverde left the pitch, most people thought the chapter was over. A red card, frustration, protests, and then back to the dressing room. The usual script, except nothing was usual that night. And that's exactly where everything turns chilling. Because according to the accounts that surfaced after the match, instead of disappearing down the tunnel like any other sent-off player would, Fede stopped. He positioned himself. He waited. Not randomly, not to catch his breath, not to talk to a staff member. He waited for Baena. Honestly, when I first heard that, I couldn't believe it. And then I believed it immediately. Why? Because everything, absolutely everything about that match was pointing toward that collision. This wasn't just anger boiling over. This wasn't a moment of adrenaline gone wrong. This was the climax of a conflict that had never truly been buried. And in cases like this, the tunnel becomes the most dangerous place in the stadium. Not the penalty box, not the center circle. The tunnel. That space where cameras thin out, where witnesses are few, where words become heavier than tackles. Merengues, the reports differ on the exact words exchanged, and I want to be responsible with you. Not everything said down there was captured on camera, so we have to separate what is reported from what is confirmed. But the essence leaves little room for doubt. There was a verbal confrontation, a real one. Direct. Loaded. And what has been described is that Valverde finally unleashed everything he had been carrying for years. That he accused Baena of being a provocateur, a man strong with words but weak in decisive duels, someone who loves to hit where it hurts but doesn't know how to stand tall when the storm finally arrives. If that's true, then this wasn't just an insult. It was an attempt to settle an old score face to face. Madrid fans know this. Valverde is not a performer. He's not a player who builds his image around drama. He's a man of running, sacrifice, dirty work, endless kilometers, and discipline. When someone like him explodes, it always means something. And that is exactly why this scene shocks so deeply. Because when the calm man turns violent, the impact is stronger than when the chaos comes from someone who lives in chaos. Supporters of the Casablanca, what strikes me the most is the reported response from Baina, because he apparently didn't back down either. And again, let me be clear, we are still in the territory of accounts and testimonies, not a full official recording. But according to several reports, he answered without taking a single step back. In essence, that he would not be intimidated, that hitting people on the pitch or off it doesn't make anyone a hero, that aggression is not courage, and that some things from the past never disappear. If those words are even close to the truth, then one thing becomes obvious immediately. This story is not over. It was never over. It was only sleeping. Madridistas, that's exactly why I believe this derby cannot be analysed only through the lens of who won. Yes, Real won. Yes, the Bernabeu roared. Yes, 3 points in a derby are massive. But what happened here touches the management of a dressing room, the image of the club, the line between personal loyalty and professional responsibility. And to me, that is the real debate. Because deep down, many supporters will instinctively defend Fede and say, if he touched his family, then I understand. And emotionally, I understand that reaction, truly. But institutionally, professionally, as a Real Madrid player, that's different. Merengue's Real Madrid is not just any club. This shirt demands things from you. It gives you immortal nights. But it also demands a level of control that very few institutions in world football ask of their players. To me, this is exactly where the DNA of the club is revealed, in the ability to win under pressure without letting chaos consume you. And that is why Valverde's tackle on Baina bothers me so much. Not because it isn't humanly understandable, it is, but because it feels like an inner defeat on a night when Real had everything in place to win with greatness. And then there was the other firestorm, the refereeing, and especially that moment when the referee reportedly wove to explain himself to Arbeloa after the sending off. Let me be blunt here. Whether it was out of necessity, instinct, a desire to calm things down, pressure from the atmosphere, or simple communication in a heated match, the image is terrible. Terrible. In a game this charged, in a Bernabeu this intense, seeing a referee create the impression that he needs to justify an obvious red card to someone on the Madrid bench gives the entire football world a scene that your rivals will use for weeks. Madridistas may like or dislike hostile interpretations, but we have to be honest. In Spanish football, every refereeing gesture around Real Madrid is magnified under a microscope. And that night, that sequence fed every suspicion. Those who say Real lives inside a bubble of influence saw it as confirmation. Those who argue that the Bernabeu commands excessive respect saw it as a symbol. Does that prove manipulation? No. Does it fuel a toxic perception? Absolutely. And sometimes in modern football, perception is almost as powerful as fact. Supporters of the Casablanca, we also have to talk about Carvajal, because a derby like this is always about red lines. Danny is the warrior soul. He's the kind of player you love having on your side because he attacks every ball like it's the last of his life. But there are nights when that fire becomes uncontrollable. Several of his challenges were judged to be on the edge. Very much on the edge. Maybe beyond it. And if you ask me honestly, when a player enters that kind of mode, the staff has to feel it immediately. They have to calm him. They have to protect him from himself. Because a warrior with no breaks in a derby played on hot coals can cost you more than he gives you. Honestly, this match could have been celebrated as a pure display of character. Real behind, Real questioned, Real pushed to the edge, then Real coming back, gritting their teeth, finding answers, striking again. It was perfect material for a heroic story. Vinicius, with his nerve, his arrogance, his cold-blooded penalty, then his weight in the decisive moments. Valverde before the red card, with that monstrous energy and that goal that symbolized the mental shift. The Bernabeu, once again, in full eruption. Everything was there. Everything. And that is exactly what makes the ending even more frustrating. Because instead of talking only about heart, courage, talent and collective strength, we're talking about the tunnel. We're talking about a brutal tackle. We're talking about a referee explaining himself. We're talking about a personal grudge contaminating the entire occasion, and to me that stains part of the beauty of the victory. Merengues, we also have to be honest about Vinicius. He will be celebrated, and in many ways he deserves it. He made an impact, he scored, he took responsibility, but Vinny is always at the centre of emotional storms. He gives you the spark, and sometimes he attracts the fire. That is both his genius and his danger. He forces the opponent out of their emotional balance. He provokes, he destabilizes, he irritates. It's a psychological talent as much as a technical one. But in a derby where everyone is already walking on embers, every gesture from him becomes a grenade. Madrid fans also know that nights like this affect the dressing room, and this is where I expect something from Real. Not in the public statements, not in the predictable press conference lines. I expect the club to act internally. If Ancelotti protects Fede in public, I'll understand it. That's part of a coach's job, not exposing his players in front of cameras. But in private? In private, he has to be absolutely firm. He has to tell him, I understand the man, but I do not accept the action. That is the nuance that separates great clubs from emotionally unstable ones. Supporters of the Casablanca, I genuinely believe the sporting punishment will be symbolically important, but humanly insufficient. A suspension is a regulatory punishment. It checks a box, it closes an administrative file, but it does not solve what exists between Valverde and Baena. The real danger is there, because if this story is not addressed, by the players, by the coaching staffs, by the wider Spanish football environment, then the next time they meet, everything can start again. Or worse, continue exactly where it stopped, with even more resentment. And honestly, that's what worries me most. Not the one-night controversy, not the TV debates, not the hashtags. What worries me is this feeling that their next meeting is already poisoned before it even happens, as if all we've done is postpone the next episode. Madridistas, in the end, this derby tells a brutal truth about modern Real Madrid. This club is still capable of winning in chaos, feeding off urgency, turning matches when everything shakes. And that is exactly what has fascinated Europe for decades.